So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at something, well, deeply personal, I think, and universal: music. And we're asking this deceptively simple question, really, but it feels critical. Can something as simple, as enjoyable as just listening to music, can that actually be a tool, maybe even a potent one, against cognitive decline?
It's a really timely investigation. It's essential, actually. As people are living longer all over the world, we're seeing this corresponding wave of age-related health issues.
Right.
It's hitting public health systems hard, and we're talking specifically here about the rise in cognitive decline and, well, ultimately dementia.
And that increase, that rising prevalence, it just makes finding ways to prevent it absolutely paramount.
Precisely. I mean, we're in a situation now where there isn't a cure for dementia, not yet anyway.
Yeah.
So that really ramps up the need to find effective strategies, things that can help us delay or, ideally prevent the symptoms from starting.
And often we think of drugs.
Right.
Or complicated medical stuff.
Exactly. We often look to pharmaceuticals or maybe highly structured therapies. But what if part of the answer is, well, simpler, something far more commonplace?
And that really is the heart of the research we're diving into today. We're looking at some fascinating findings, spearheaded by Monash honors student Emma Jaffa and Professor Joanne Ryan. And just to give you, the listener, a sense of the sort of the weight behind this, this isn't a small survey. They drew information from a huge project, the ASPRIN, in reducing events in the elderly study, AIRPR, they call it.
Right, and its companion study, the ALSOP substudy, this is built on a really massive gold standard longitudinal data set. Very credible.
Standard, yeah.
And what gives these specific findings real statistical punch is just the sheer scale and also the focus.
Okay.
This analysis involved tracking data from, get this, over 10,800 older adults.
Wow.
And they specifically focused on people aged 70 and older. So these results speak directly to the group most vulnerable to these age-related cognitive changes.
Okay, so let's jump straight into that major finding then, because honestly, it really reframes how we might think about just, auditory engagement, listening later in life. What did this massive study find about people who simply made listening to music a regular, consistent habit?
Yeah, the main finding is, wow, it's powerful. Individuals who reported that they consistently listened to music, the ones who described themselves as always doing so, they had a 39% lower risk of developing dementia.
39%.
Compared with those who said they never, rarely, or only occasionally listened.
39% lower risk just from listening. That's huge.
Yeah.
But before we go further, we should probably unpack that term consistently listened.
Yeah.
How did they define that? Was it like hours per day or frequency or?
That's a great question. A crucial one for actually applying this. So in the Astashri study, engagement like this was measured through self-reported lifestyle habits.
Okay. Self-reported.
Yeah. So consistent listening really refers to how people perceived music fitting into their routine. Treating it as a regular, expected part of their day or week, not just background noise that happens to be on.
Ah, so it's about the habit itself.
Exactly. The habit of active, or at least intentional, auditory engagement seems to be the key here. It wasn't necessarily tied to a specific duration, like, 30 minutes versus 3 hours. It was more about the regularity.
Okay, so consistency over intensity, maybe. And it wasn't just about the big headline of dementia risk, was it? This consistent listening also showed up in sort of immediate cognitive health measures.
Absolutely. Yeah, beyond that dementia risk reduction figure, the habit, this consistent listening, it was associated with a 17% lower incidence of cognitive impairment overall.
17% lower overall impairment.
Right, which suggests that just maintaining this regular auditory stimulation is fundamentally protective, kind of across the board for cognitive health.
And they dug even deeper, right? Into which specific cognitive areas saw the most benefit? You mentioned a couple of key areas where the always listening group performed better.
That's right. The first was overall cognition, which makes sense. It aligns with that global risk reduction we just talked about. But the second one, I think, is where it gets really relevant to, daily life for listeners. They showed significantly higher scores in episodic memory.
Episodic memory. Okay, explain that a bit. That's the memory for events, right?
Exactly. It's the type of memory that lets you recall specific personal events, where you were last Sunday, the details of a chat you had yesterday, or even just whether you remembered to take your medication this morning.
Right. The sort of narrative thread of your day, your week.
Precisely. And the decline in episodic memory is often one of the earliest and frankly most impactful signs of cognitive decline because it hits your autonomy, your ability ability to just navigate your own timeline.
Yeah, I can see that.
So this finding suggests that consistently engaging with music might actually be helping to preserve the neural machinery needed to maintain that really crucial personal timeline.
Okay, this is where the comparison gets really interesting for me.
Yeah.
Because, for decades, we've kind of heard that playing an instrument is the ultimate brain workout.
The active engagement idea.
Right. It involves motor skills, reading music maybe, complex listening. So if listening reduces risk by that huge 39%, how did actively playing an instrument stack up in this study?
Well, playing an instrument definitely showed strong benefits too, which, confirms a lot of existing research. The data show that people who played a musical instrument had a highly significant 35% reduction in dementia risk.
Okay, 35%.
Yeah. Still a massive win for active musical participation, undeniably.
No, wait, hang on. 39% lower risk for listening versus 35% lower risk for playing.
Yeah.
I would have bet the other way around. I think most people would assume the active playing would give a bigger benefit. Did the study offer any hypotheses for why consistent listening might edge out active playing, at least in this older age group?
It is. It's definitely counterintuitive on the surface. And the researchers, they mostly focused on the practical implications rather than pinning down a definitive neurobiological reason in this paper.
Okay.
However, if you think about it in the context of this specific population, 70 years and older, the hypothesis really leans towards accessibility and consistency.
Ah, okay. Tell me more about that.
Well, playing an instrument, while it's incredibly beneficial neurally, it also demands quite a bit, right? A higher cognitive load, fine motor skills, sustained practice.
A commitment.
Exactly. For someone in their 70s or 80s, just maintaining that level of active engagement might be tougher. Physical limitations could creep in, arthritis, maybe just the time commitment feels like more of a hurdle.
Whereas listening.
Listening is essentially effortless. It needs minimal physical or, frankly, cognitive output. So it's just much, much easier to sustain as a daily, consistent habit over many years.
I see. So that slightly larger benefit for listening might just be because it's easier to always listen than it is to always practice. The barrier to entry is practically zero.
That seems to be the most logical interpretation, yes. The protective factor appears linked not just to how complex the activity is, but how sustainably present it is in someone's routine.
Consistency again.
Consistent engagement, yeah. Whether it's active or receptive, that seems to be the key variable here.
Okay, so 39% for listening, 35% for playing. What about the group doing both? The real music lovers who play and listen regularly.
Yeah, they looked at that too. That combined group also showed strong protection, as you'd expect. Those who regularly engaged in both listening and playing had a 33% decreased risk of dementia.
33%. Interesting. Slightly lower than either individually.
And a 22% decreased risk of cognitive impairment overall. So again, really solid numbers. I think if you connect all these figures, the bigger picture reinforces the main message. Just integrating music into your life consistently in whatever way works for you seems to offer this measurable protective factor for the brain.
Which leads right into the implications for, say, public health advice, right? As the Monash team noted, Ms. Jaffa suggested these music activities may be an accessible strategy. That word accessible feels really key.
It really does. It kind of democratizes brain fitness, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's incredibly encouraging to think that, protecting our brain doesn't necessarily require some radical, expensive lifestyle overhaul.
Exactly. And Professor Ryan, she reinforced that point, noting that how our brains age isn't just predetermined by, your age and your genes.
Right.
It can be profoundly influenced by your environment, by your lifestyle choices. And this study provides pretty powerful evidence that we have these practical levers we can actually pull.
Levers like putting on a favorite album. We're looking for these low-barrier interventions, things almost everyone can afford, and, crucially, enjoy. Music checks all those boxes.
Absolutely. The study strongly suggests that these kinds of lifestyle-based interventions, like just incorporating music, even if it's just a consistent playlist you enjoy, can actively promote cognitive health. It shifts the focus, maybe slightly, away from only looking at costly medical options towards using these accessible existing pleasures.
But, and there's always a but with this kind of research, as we always stress on the deep dive, especially when you have such powerful numbers like 39%, we absolutely need to talk about the caveat.
The important one.
The researchers themselves, being careful scientists, they emphasize this study shows a very strong association, but they cannot definitively prove causation. For you, the listener, why is that distinction association versus causation so critical here?
It's probably the most important point for interpreting this kind of data accurately. When we see an association, it just means two things in this case. Music engagement and lower dementia risk tend to happen together in the same people.
Okay. They're linked.
They're linked. But we can't automatically say the music causes the risk reduction because there might be other factors, what we call confounding variables, that are influencing both things.
Okay, so what might those confounding factors look like, practically speaking, in this older group?
Well, think about the kind of person who is still consistently actively listening to music after age 70.
Okay.
They might be more likely to be, say, socially engaged. Maybe they go to concerts or discuss music with friends. They might have a wider social network, which we know is protective.
Right, social connection helps.
Or they might simply have better overall baseline physical health, which allows them to maintain these kinds of leisure habits in the first place. And those things, social engagement, better physical health, are also independently linked to lower cognitive decline risk.
Ah, I see. So the music listening could just be a marker for someone who has a generally healthier, more engaged lifestyle overall, rather than the music itself being the direct cause of the benefit.
Exactly. That's the possibility that an observational study like this can't completely rule out. It's a really important challenge to consider with the data.
Did the study try to account for any of that? I mean, S3 collected a lot of health data, right? Did they try to control for things like social engagement levels or baseline health?
Yes, they did. They controlled for multiple potential confounders, like education, socioeconomic status, physical activity, depression, baseline cognition, and the association with music engagement, both listening and playing, still held strong even after those adjustments.
Okay, so that strengthens the link.
It definitely strengthens it. It suggests the music link is pretty robust, but, because it's observational, based on watching people over time rather than assigning an intervention, you can never be 100% certain you've accounted for every possible influencing factor. So the takeaway for the listener shouldn't be music is a guaranteed magic bullet. It's more that making music a dedicated, consistent part of your life is very strongly correlated with significantly better outcomes for your brain health later on. It sort of validates prioritizing this enjoyable activity.
Yeah, it shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from searching for that single definitive medical answer, maybe, towards embracing these powerful lifestyle choices. The message seems pretty clear. Based on this huge data set, making music a consistent part of your routine after 70 is strongly linked with better cognitive outcomes. And whether you're, a virtuoso practicing hours a day or just someone who loves curating the perfect playlist, it seems those auditory pathways are doing important work.
I think the core message is powerful precisely because it takes something enjoyable, something simple, and validates it with serious research. We often hunt for complex solutions, maybe pills or intensive therapy. But this data really suggests that adopting these straightforward lifestyle choices, like deliberately making music a part of your day, offers this tangible, measurable association with cognitive resilience.
So as you, our listener, reflect on this really compelling data point, this idea that our lifestyle choices really can influence our long-term health, maybe ask yourself this. If consistently listening to music is linked to such a significant reduction in cognitive risk, what other simple, accessible, maybe enjoyable activities in your own daily routine might also be working away, influencing your long-term cognitive well-being?
Yeah, it's a great question to ponder. Do you maybe treat music just as, background noise while you're doing chores? Or are you actively, intentionally treating it as essential and delightful brain food? Maybe the next time you put on a playlist, just consider for a moment. You might not just be entertaining yourself, you could actually be investing in a small but potentially meaningful way in your future cognitive health.